The unwelcome arrival. The moving truck rumbled to a stop in front of 1625 Willow Creek Drive, a pristine, gated neighborhood tucked just outside the city. David Carter stepped out of his black SUV, taking a deep breath. After years of service in law enforcement, including grueling nights and intense cases, he'd finally purchased his dream home. The house was elegant, with wide porches and oak trees framing the yard. But as he unloaded the first box, David could feel the eyes. Curtains shifted. A woman in a floral blouse whispered to her neighbor. A golf cart zipped past, slowing just long enough for the man inside to stare before driving off. David was used to being observed. He was, after all, the chief of police for the neighboring city of Brookview, but this felt different. It wasn't curiosity. It was judgment. Within an hour, a pristine white golf cart with the HOA logo rolled up to his driveway. 3 people stepped out like a self-important parade. "Good afternoon," chirped Linda Worthington, the HOA president. She wore a pearl necklace and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Linda, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. This is Tom, and this is Rick." Tom, tall and broad, had a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses. Rick looked like he took his security role way too seriously, despite the HOA logo on his shirt. "Welcome to Willow Creek," Linda continued. "We like to make sure new residents understand our standards." David set down the box he was carrying. "I appreciate that. I read the HOA guidelines before I bought the place. I'll make sure to follow the rules." His voice was calm even. Linda's smile widened, but her tone carried a hint of steel. "Good. We just want to make sure everything remains as it should be." Tom handed David a packet, almost like serving a warrant. "Here's your compliance packet. We'll be keeping an eye out to ensure everything's up to code." David raised an eyebrow. "Of course." As the cart rolled away, he caught Linda glancing at his car, then whispering to Tom. Their expressions made it clear he wasn't their ideal neighbor. Over the next week, David began unpacking fully, adding a few planters by the porch and repainting his mailbox. Every day, without fail, he received a letter from them. "Debate Day 1. Your grass length exceeds HOA maximum by 1.5 inches. Day 2. Unauthorized change of mailbox paint. Color. Day 3. Unregistered vehicle. His cousin's. Car visiting for the weekend. Day 4. Trash cans visible from the street for 14 minutes. Past pickup time. It was absurd. He dealt with hardened criminals and complex investigations, but this was petty harassment. Still, David didn't respond angrily. He filed every letter carefully, keeping records like evidence in a case. At the next HOA meeting, he quietly sat in the back of the community center. Linda gave a presentation on preserving neighborhood image, subtly referring to new residents who might not understand our culture. A few heads nodded. A few others shifted uncomfortably. David simply observed. The Whisper Network neighbors began whispering. Some avoided him. Others gave him sympathetic looks but said nothing. Rumors spread. He's renting illegally. He's opening some kind of business. He doesn't belong here. Tom and Rick started patrolling the street near his house at odd hours. One night, David saw them parked outside at 11:30 p.m., their car's lights off. When he stepped outside, they drove off quickly. David made a mental note. If this escalated, he'd respond, but on his terms, not theirs. They had no idea who they were dealing with. A foreshadowing encounter. One sunny afternoon, as David fixed a loose shutter, Linda walked up his driveway uninvited. "You know," she began sweetly, "a lot of people in this neighborhood value tradition. Change can make people uncomfortable. Perhaps if you just kept a lower profile, things would go more smoothly." David turned slowly. His voice was controlled, but his gaze was sharp. "I've done nothing wrong, Ms. Worthington. I follow rules closely. Sometimes closer than others might like." For a moment, Linda's mask slipped. She didn't like being challenged. But she recovered quickly, plastering on her smile. "Of course, just looking out for the community." She turned and left. David watched her go. The pattern was clear. They wanted him out. They'd escalate soon. And when they did, he'd be ready. The Willow Creek HOA board gathered in the clubhouse late one evening, long after most porch lights had gone out. The air conditioner hummed softly, but the atmosphere was electric with irritation. Linda Worthington slammed a stack of complaint letters onto the long oak table. "This," she hissed, "is becoming unacceptable." Tom leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest. "He's not budging, Linda. We've sent warnings, fines, everything." "He's not even flinching," Rick added. "And every time I drive past his house, he's watching us. Like he knows what we're up to." Linda tapped her manicured nails against the table. "Because he does. He's not like the others. Most new residents bend quickly. But this one is documenting everything. He's dangerous," Tom smirked. "Then maybe it's time we remind him who runs this neighborhood." The HOA board wasn't just strict, they were manipulative. In the past, they'd driven out uncooperative residents with relentless fines, public shaming at meetings, and veiled threats. But David Carter didn't scare easily. Linda leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "He's violating multiple clauses. Renovations without approval, vehicle issues, exterior modifications. What if we escalate it?" Rick raised an eyebrow. "You mean legal escalation?" Linda shook her head slowly, smiling like a snake. "Perception of legal escalation. We don't need a court when fear works faster." Tom's grin widened. "Ah, like what we did with the Rodriguez family. Fake summons, unmarked security visits. Scared them right out within a week." "Exactly," Linda purred. "But this time we'll do it bigger, more official, more intimidating. The scheme takes shape within days. A plan was in motion. Fabricated violations. Tom drafted a 12-page notice of community fraud, claiming David had submitted forged ownership documents and made illegal modifications to his property. It looked real: legal formatting, HOA letterhead, fake signatures, bogus court summons. Rick, who once worked night security at a courthouse, had old templates of police citations. He modified them to look like a county arrest warrant, accusing David of fraudulent residency and hostile behavior toward HOA officials, fake officers. Tom and Rick had tactical-looking jackets from their old security days. Add a few knockoff badges ordered online, handcuffs from a surplus store, and dark utility belts. They looked close enough to fool a casual observer. The idea was simple: show up at David's door at night, pretend to be law enforcement, arrest him on the spot, and scare him into either selling or submitting. Linda justified it with twisted logic. "It's not technically a crime," she told Tom and Rick. "We're just enforcing community standards." Creatively, they all laughed. None of them realized they were about to pick a fight with the actual chief of police. Meanwhile, David's watchful eye across the street, from the comfort of his home office. David Carter reviewed security camera footage on his laptop. Every inch of his property was covered by discreet, high-resolution cameras, installed the day he moved in. He watched as Tom and Rick met Linda in her driveway late one night. They huddled around the hood of Tom's car, holding papers, pointing at his house. Rick pulled something from a bag, a fake badge. David leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. So that's the game. He'd dealt with criminal syndicates more organized than this HOA board, but their arrogance was astounding. He made a few notes in a small black notebook, marking dates, times, faces, and actions. Then he picked up his phone and made a quiet call. "Maria, it's David. I might need a few eyes on Willow Creek soon. Off the record for now." On the other end, Officer Maria Lopez, one of his most trusted officers, didn't hesitate. "Say the word, Chief. I've got your back." The HOA meeting. Round 2 a week later, David attended another HOA meeting. Linda was mid-speech about criminal elements infiltrating neighborhoods, though she never named names. Tom passed around new violation reports for residents to sign. Some neighbors eagerly scribbled their names. Others hesitated, glancing toward David, sitting silently in the back. When Linda finally made eye contact with him, David smiled faintly. Not a warm smile, a knowing one. It unsettled her. She stumbled over her next sentence for the first time. After the meeting, Tom muttered, "He's too calm." It's creepy. Linda brushed him off, but a flicker of unease crossed her face. Final preparations. 2 nights later, the HOA clubhouse lights burned late into the evening. The trio rehearsed their fake arrest like actors practicing a play. Tom practiced barking, "Sir, you're under arrest for fraud and harassment of HOA officials." Rick adjusted his fake cuffs. Linda handed them the falsified warrant, folded neatly in a manila folder. "Make it quick, make it clean," she instructed. "You knock on that door at 10 p.m. sharp. The later it is, the more intimidating it feels. He'll be confused, overwhelmed, and more likely to comply," Rick chuckled. "And if he resists?" Tom patted his holster. "Not real, but intimidating enough." "We'll improvise," Linda smirked, picturing David leaving the neighborhood with his tail between his legs. By the end of this week, he'll either be gone or obedient. What none of them knew was that David had cameras rolling, real officers on standby, and a legal trap already set for them. It was a quiet Thursday night. The moon hung low, casting pale light over the manicured lawns of Willow Creek. Sprinklers ticked softly. Porch lights glowed like distant lanterns. Inside 1625 Willow Creek Drive, David Carter sat in his living room, dressed in sweatpants and a black t-shirt, sipping coffee as if it were any ordinary night. But his eyes weren't on the TV. They were on the security camera feeds, displayed on the large screen above his desk. Front yard, driveway, street, porch. At 9:57 p.m., a white SUV rolled slowly into view. No official markings. Its headlights were off. The vehicle stopped just past the hedges, out of direct sight of most houses. David's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Right on time," he murmured. The knock at exactly 10:00 p.m., a hard, authoritative knock shook the front door. Bang, 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 "Open up!" "Police!" a voice barked. David didn't move immediately. He calmly set down his coffee, checked his watch, and then walked to the door. Before opening it, he pressed a button under the frame, activating multiple hidden cameras around the porch. When he swung the door open, Tom and Rick stood there in dark jackets with cheap badges glinting under the porch light. Their posture screamed, "Wannabe SWAT, David Carter." Tom barked, "Yes?" David's voice was cool, unreadable. Rick thrust a folded paper toward him. "You're under arrest for fraud, property violations, and harassment of HOA officials. Step outside now." David took the paper, unfolded it slowly, and scanned it. His eyes flicked across the shoddy formatting, the misspelled legal terms, the fictitious county seal printed in grayscale. He looked up at them with a slight tilt of his head. "This is creative." Tom stiffened. "Sir, don't make this difficult." David leaned casually against the doorframe. "You're impersonating law enforcement." "That's a felony." "Are you sure you want to keep playing dress-up?" "That's the trap." Springs Tom stepped forward, trying to project dominance. "Sir, step outside now or we'll be forced to detain you." Rick pulled out a pair of cheap steel cuffs, holding them like trophies. Inside the house, a small red light blinked on. David's hidden audio recorders were live. In his ear, through a nearly invisible earpiece, came Maria's voice. "We see them, Chief. Unit 4 is parked a block away." "Say the word." David spoke just loudly enough for his porch cameras to pick up. "Gentlemen, you're trespassing on private property, presenting falsified documents, and impersonating police officers. I suggest you leave before you make things worse for yourselves." Tom's face flushed. "Don't try to play smart. We have the authority to—" "Authority?" David interrupted sharply. His calm mask finally cracked into something commanding. "You have no authority here." "But I do." The reveal, David straightened his posture, suddenly radiating the kind of presence that stops a room cold. "Tom." "Rick. My name is David Carter. I'm the Chief of Police of Brookview City, badge number 0201. And right now, every word you're saying is being recorded on 4 cameras, 2 audio devices, and backed up live to a cloud server." The silence was instant and heavy. Rick blinked. "You're— what?" David stepped forward. "I've been watching you two for weeks. I know about the fabricated violations, the phony warrant, the harassment, and this," he tapped Tom's fake badge, "isn't just a bad idea. It's criminal impersonation." Tom stammered, suddenly unsure. "Linda told us." David raised a finger. Oh, don't worry. Linda's part of this too. And tonight, you just handed me the evidence I needed on a silver platter. The real officers arrived before Tom or Rick could speak again. 2 real patrol cars rounded the corner, lights flashing silently until they pulled up to the curb. Officer Maria Lopez stepped out of the lead vehicle, her posture confident, hand resting on her sidearm. 2 other officers followed. "Chief," she greeted calmly, nodding. "Maria," David replied, as if this were routine. Tom's face drained of color. Rick took a step back. Maria turned to them. "Gentlemen, please keep your hands where I can see them. Drop the fake cuffs." Rick's hands shook as he let the cuffs clatter to the porch. Maria continued, reading from her notepad. "You are being detained for suspicion of impersonating law enforcement, trespassing, and attempted unlawful detention. Anything you say can and will be used against you." David crossed his arms, watching with a cool, satisfied expression. Linda's shock down the street, Linda Worthington peeked nervously through her blinds. She expected to see David being dragged away. Instead, she saw flashing lights, real police cars, and Tom and Rick being placed in the back of patrol cars. Her jaw dropped. She fumbled for her phone, dialing Tom's number. No answer. Rick's straight to voicemail. Her palms began to sweat. "Oh no, no," she muttered. She had set this in motion. She thought they'd scare him. She never imagined they were targeting the chief of police himself. David's final words, as Tom and Rick were escorted to the cars. Tom looked over his shoulder. "Linda made us do it." He blurted. David didn't respond. He just gave him a look that said checkmate. Maria leaned toward David. "You want to press charges tonight, Chief?" David considered it for a moment, then said quietly, "Yes, all of them. And tell the DA we'll be adding HOA leadership to the investigation." Maria nodded. "Already ahead of you." As the SUV doors slammed shut, David turned back toward his house. The porch light flickered softly, illuminating his calm face. They thought they could scare him. Instead, they had walked straight into a legal ambush, and this was just the beginning. The morning after the fake arrest attempt, Willow Creek was buzzing like a hornet's nest someone had kicked open. Residents whispered in driveways. Golf carts gathered in clusters, and the HOA clubhouse doors stayed firmly shut. For the first time in years, Linda Worthington didn't make her usual morning patrol. She stayed inside, pacing by the window with her phone pressed to her ear, leaving a trail of unanswered voicemails for Tom and Rick. But outside, the real investigation had already begun. Official statements at the Brookview City Police Department. Tom and Rick sat in separate interview rooms. The once cocky HOA enforcers were now pale, sweating, and visibly shaken. Detectives methodically asked questions. "Who instructed you to impersonate law enforcement? How long have you been issuing fake citations? What exactly did Linda Worthington say about dealing with David Carter?" Tom cracked first. "She told us to make it look real. She said he was dangerous. She said if we scared him, he'd leave." Rick moments later echoed the same. "She planned the whole thing. She gave us the papers. She said the board would handle it quietly if anything went wrong. Meanwhile, Officer Maria Lopez compiled every piece of evidence David had meticulously collected over the last few weeks. Violation letters, HOA emails, camera footage, and the audio recording of the arrest attempt. She placed the file on Captain Hughes' desk with a satisfying thump. "This isn't just impersonation," she said. "This is targeted harassment, document forgery, and HOA abuse on a scale we haven't seen in years." The neighborhood shifts back in Willow Creek. The neighborhood mood was changing fast. Janet Myers, a longtime resident, stood at the end of her driveway, talking to a group of neighbors. "You know, I always thought those violation letters were too much," she whispered. "Last year they fined me for hanging Christmas lights 2 days early." Another neighbor added, "Linda's been running this place like her personal kingdom. Maybe this is karma." A few residents who had previously stayed silent now spoke up. Anonymous tips began trickling into the police tip line. "Check the HOA's budget. I think they're skimming funds. Linda had Tom threaten people into paying fines. She forged signatures on board decisions. For years, Linda's power had been built on silence, intimidation, and polished appearances. But now, fear was shifting sides. The financial trail David wasn't just relying on police work. He quietly initiated a forensic audit of the HOA's finances through the city's legal department. Within a week, the results came back like a hammer: $82,000 in miscellaneous expenses unaccounted for. Multiple checks written to companies that didn't exist. HOA reserve funds transferred to an account under Linda Worthington's maiden name. Maria brought the report into David's office. "Chief," she said with a grin, "she's cooked her books worse than a cartel front." David flipped through the pages slowly. Exactly what I expected. Community meeting, the turning point. 2 weeks later, a mandatory community meeting was called. Not by Linda, but by an interim HOA administrator appointed by the city. The clubhouse was packed to the walls. David arrived in uniform for the first time, not to intimidate, but to make things clear. Residents turned in their seats, murmuring as the man they once saw as just the new neighbor now stood at the front of the room with quiet authority. Linda sat near the back, looking nothing like her usual composed self. Her pearl necklace was gone, her posture slouched, and her phone buzzed constantly with messages she couldn't fix. The interim administrator, a firm woman named Caroline Brooks, stepped to the podium. "Good evening, everyone. As you may know, recent events have brought serious issues to light regarding the Willow Creek HOA. At the request of law enforcement and under city oversight, we are launching a full investigation into HOA activities over the past 5 years." Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Caroline continued. "Chief Carter has provided invaluable evidence. Several board members have already given statements. We have reason to believe multiple HOA officials engaged in fraud, harassment, and illegal impersonation." Linda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. David speaks. Then David stepped forward. The room fell silent. "When I moved here," he began calmly, "I came as a resident. I expected to live quietly, follow the rules like everyone else, and be part of the community. Instead, I became a target because someone thought power gave them the right to abuse others." He glanced briefly at Linda without naming her. "I didn't respond with fear. I responded with the law, and the law is clear. Intimidation, fraud, and impersonation have consequences. This community deserves better than fear and corruption. You deserve accountability." For the first time, many residents stood and applauded. It wasn't a thunderous roar, but it was honest, genuine. Linda stared at the floor, jaw clenched, cheeks flushed. The legal machine. Turns after the meeting, detectives approached Linda quietly. "Ma'am, we'd like you to come with us to answer some questions." Her hands trembled. "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time," the detective replied. "But we recommend cooperation." She reluctantly stood, surrounded by neighbors' stares, not of admiration anymore, but of betrayal. Over the following days, subpoenas went out. Bank accounts were frozen. Board members resigned overnight. The once invincible HOA regime was collapsing like a house of cards in slow motion, and at the center of it all was David. Not gloating, not vengeful, just quietly ensuring justice ran its full course. The sun was rising over Willow Creek, spilling soft gold over its perfectly trimmed lawns. For years, the neighborhood had looked flawless on the outside, but beneath the clean fences and brick facades had lived a rotting power structure, built on intimidation, lies, and whispered threats. Now, that structure was collapsing for all to see. The courtroom reckoning. 2 months after the night of the fake arrest, Linda Worthington, once the untouchable queen of the HOA, stood in a crowded county courtroom. Gone were her pearls and designer blouses. She wore a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back in a tight, nervous bun. Tom and Rick sat in the defendant's section beside her. Heads low, the prosecutor's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "Your Honor, The defendants conspired to impersonate law enforcement, harass a law-abiding resident, and defraud their own community through falsified documents and misappropriation of funds. They abused their positions of trust for personal gain. Linda shifted in her seat. Cameras from local news stations lined the back wall. Neighbors she once ruled over now watched with narrowed eyes, whispering to one another. When the judge asked for a plea, Tom blurted out, "Guilty," without hesitation. Rick followed. Linda hesitated, hands trembling before finally muttering, "Guilty." The sound echoed in the courtroom like a bell tolling the end of an era. Consequences? The sentencing was swift. Tom and Rick received prison sentences for impersonating officers and unlawful detention, along with hefty fines. Linda faced multiple charges: fraud, conspiracy, harassment, and forgery. She was sentenced to several years of probation, ordered to repay tens of thousands of dollars to the HOA, and banned from holding any leadership or community position again. When the judge read her punishment, Linda's face went pale. She glanced at David in the gallery. He sat in his uniform, composed, steady. She tried to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to justify, but no words came. She had underestimated him. She had underestimated the truth. The neighborhood rebuilds. With the corrupt board dismantled, Willow Creek was placed under temporary city oversight. Caroline Brooks, the interim administrator, led new, transparent elections for a fresh HOA board. This time, things were different. No more whisper campaigns, no more intimidation. Residents actually listened to each other. Janet Myers, once too scared to speak against Linda, stood at the community meeting podium and said, "We let one person's power turn this place toxic. It's on all of us to make sure that never happens again." Applause filled the room, not forced, not polite, but genuine. David didn't run for any position. He declined the many neighbors urging him to become HOA president. Instead, he offered something better: guidance. "I'm not here to lead this neighborhood," he told them. "I'm here to live in it. But I'll make sure it stays safe and fair for everyone." Linda's fall from grace word spread fast in the city. Linda, once the feared queen of Willow Creek, became a cautionary tale. She moved out quietly, her house listed for sale at a reduced price. The woman who had once walked through the neighborhood with her head held high, now left with no farewell, no supporters, and no control. Tom and Rick's mugshots circulated online as examples of why impersonating law enforcement carries real consequences. Ironically, the same HOA rules Linda had wielded like a weapon now worked against her. Her property, abandoned during her trial, racked up genuine violation fines due to overgrown grass and peeling paint. The board, under new leadership, issued her formal notices like clockwork. There was no favoritism anymore. David's quiet victory. David never bragged. He never gloated. He didn't need to. Every morning, he'd drink his coffee on the porch, the same spot where Tom and Rick had tried to arrest him months earlier. But now neighbors waved as they passed. Kids played freely in the cul-de-sac without fear of being fined for chalk drawings. One afternoon, Janet approached him with a basket of fresh-baked bread. "You know," she said softly, "I was scared to speak up before. But when you stood up to them, you gave us all courage." David smiled. "You didn't need me for that. You just needed to remember your voice." She laughed, eyes misty. "Well, consider this a thank you anyway." Epilogue: Poetic Justice. 6 months later, Willow Creek held its first neighborhood block party in years. No HOA surveillance. No rule enforcers with clipboards. Just music, food, and families enjoying the evening. David walked through the crowd quietly, blending in like any other neighbor. People stopped to thank him, shake his hand, share stories. At one point, little kids dressed up in toy police uniforms ran past him, laughing. One saluted him clumsily. David returned the salute with a smile. Maria, who was off duty and enjoying a burger at the grill, nudged him. "You realize you turned a neighborhood scandal into a citywide case study, right? Law schools are probably going to use this someday." David chuckled. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just didn't let bullies win." He looked around at the lights strung across the street, the smell of barbecue in the air, and the sound of genuine laughter. For the first time since moving in, Willow Creek felt like home. Closing narration, YouTube voiceover style. In the end, the HOA that tried to break a man ended up breaking itself. They sent fake officers to arrest the wrong person and uncovered a real leader instead. Justice doesn't always roar in courtrooms. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, porch by porch, until the truth stands on its own.